Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I'm glad you could join us. On this channel, we take a long-form look at particular subjects, and each week we talk about it all week long, which is rather amazing. And this week we are talking about the classic dungeon crawl. Like, is the classic dungeon crawl dead? Do we save it? Do we skip it? Do we slay it and get rid of it? Well, uh, if you really want to go back into our archives, yes, so long ago, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can take a look at those. There's at least an average of 3 hours of content there. But today, on Third Pillar of Exploration Thursday, one of my babies, I love to take a look at whatever subject we are using and frame it around the third pillar of tabletop role-playing games. So I always have to give this description. The third pillar of gaming is about exploration, where the first and second pillar are combat and social interactions, relatively speaking. So exploration to me is not just about, which of course we're going to have to talk about it today, is not just about exploring musty dungeons and overgrown jungles and desolate deserts. Going finding ancient scripts and uncovering artifacts left from a bygone age, which of course it absolutely involves that. But it also involves like survival and using your wits, and of course, this is something that I always try to put in there, that the environment itself could and really should be another character in the game, going so far as to have any number of stable to dynamic mechanical effects as well. All right. So what does that have to do with dungeon crawling? Well, I think it has everything to do with dungeon crawling. All right. Now, for me, when it comes to exploration, you cannot avoid the trap problem. And the trap problem is it's nothing ephemeral, it's nothing psychological. It's literally the problem with traps. And that problem with traps, I guess you could throw a couple of quotes around that, is based on your opinion of traps and how they're used, and maybe even the legacy of those traps. Like, for example, you guys brought up Grimtooth's Traps series of books, where they were agnostic traps, books designed with these very elaborate. What is the name of the cartoon series of the overly complicated mechanism to get something very simple done? It's the I remember when in Philadelphia there was a place where you could just drop a small metal ball bearing into a contraption, and it would roll and flip and twist and knock down dominoes and get picked up in a basket, and then it would go into a little fake hot air balloon and all this kind of business. And so sometimes you get these like really elaborate traps, and I just remember them from like the mid '80s or something. These really weird traps and such. And I think one of the problems that traps have is that they are, first of all, sometimes just placed into a location unreasonably, right? You have a number of monsters hanging around, and then all of a sudden there's like why would someone have, I don't know, a floor that drops away into an acid pit trap? And you're like, well, wouldn't that affect the people who live there? Like, why would you surround your house with, one of your halls has an acid trap and the other hall has the hallway spins around and dumps you into a fire, and some of the traps are a little bit ridiculous, if for no other reason that no reasonable sentient creature would have a trap like that around them for their front door. Sure, an alarm, maybe. maybe a net or something like that to capture someone. Yeah, but yeah. um, Ogre says, you're giving me an idea for a short story regarding such a castle. Yeah. So we do have ourselves our trap problem. Now, the other part of exploration as well deals with literally exploring the unknown, getting to the dungeon, whatever that dungeon may be, whether it's an ancient temple or a hidden crypt or I don't know, even a portal that's only been exposed every 1001 days, and the PCs find such a portal and go through it. Or there's an incursion from the Underdark, and the PCs follow the pathway that these beings that live down in this underworld are, and they follow the pathway down into the unknown. And I find that sometimes we as world creators want our player characters to explore the world, but maybe we don't reward them for exploring the world as much as we would like. And a reward, of course, a reward can be a magic item. A reward can be maybe a contact with an NPC that's long lasting. But one award that we never really give out is finding out a secret about the environment that they can use to their advantage. The rogue that sneaks around to try to get an advantage over top of the goblinoids and finds out that there's a ledge with there it is, Rube Goldberg machine. Thank you there, Dead Man. I knew you knew what I was talking about. This idea that, like, oh, maybe the character finds out that there are loose stones on top of a ledge that could be dumped on the enemy, or someone finds out that there is a secret passage to get around a major patrol or something that would overwhelm the party, or the player characters find the pit traps and don't activate any of them, or they are literally like tribalist pit traps just covered over with leaves and things, and the PCs can lead their enemies over top of those said traps that the PCs have avoided and cause the enemy itself to fall into them or something. Like giving, as a matter of fact, in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, they do suggest that alongside giving inspiration to apply disadvantage or advantage when the player characters are in an advantageous position. And that advantageous position doesn't need to be something on the character sheet. It could be something in the environment. That same rogue or ranger or something with a small short sword or dagger backs into a tight corridor to prevent their enemies to force their enemies to go into a smaller, thinner, narrower passage, much like in the movie 300, forcing the enemy to have to fight, only one or two at a time instead of the 38 that are coming after that particular player character. Or someone finds a way to, gain the high ground, right? As enemies try to scamper up the steep incline, and the PC climbs up the incline and takes the high ground and is able to survey the area and attack their enemies and such. Yeah. The Rube Goldberg form of trap building could be a little bit ridiculous, right? A Rube Goldberg machine, named after American cartoonist Rube Goldberg, is a machine intentionally designed to perform a simple task in an indirect and overly complicated way. Usually, these machines consist of a series of simple, unrelated devices. The action of each triggers the next one, right? And sometimes I think when we think about traps, we put ourselves into a little bit of a psychological conundrum that a trap must be this overly complicated, geared, constructed, well-designed thing, where while you can have them in an adventure, especially if you specifically are saying, hey, this particular temple was designed by a very advanced group, or was specifically designed to keep a hidden treasure, or an ancient individual kept away from society or something. But if we relax our definition of what a trap is and just think about the environment itself, whether there's traps or layers, puzzles, riddles, obstacles, hazards, and used in the environment and combine it all together, I think we can still add in traps, classic or not, and still add in hazards, classic or not, and still have some fun when it comes to dungeon delving. An example would be just using the environment, right? Uh, is the dungeon in an Arctic location and the floors and ceilings have frozen, then maybe it's very slippery. And maybe, just maybe, if the player characters go in with lanterns and torches, they might start melting the ice and cause some other kind of hazard, like, I don't know, maybe undead frozen behind the walls or something while they try to camp out or something, right? Yeah, maybe, like I said, maybe it's frozen and it's very slippery. Maybe it's just very cold, and you have to watch out for frostbite or something. That puts in hours of entertainment. uh, in the Discord, placing in the Rube Goldberg machine contest. Uh, it's a contest in which college or high school students build devices to complete a simple task in a minimum of 20 steps in the style of American cartoonist Rube Goldberg. That's awesome. And yes, there are people who are very very skilled at designing those Rube Goldberg machines where you have these 20 different things going on, and just like to do some simple thing like, isn't the trap supposed to just like waylay the party? Like, why does it have to have like uh 37 gears in the background and a pressure plate in the middle of the floor and a lever at the other end, um Dealer Umbra says natural hazards definitely make a lot more sense to me than artificial traps, right? And why I'm a proponent of natural things, oh, mind you, these can be man-made, but why I'm a big proponent of natural hazards is because you can foreshadow that stuff well up front, right? Hey guys, you're going into you've delved deep into the dungeon. Of course, we're talking about dungeon crawling, right? You go into the cavern in the Arctic wilderness or something, and yeah, it's hella cold. Your breath is coming out of your mouth. The very moisture from your nose and mouth is freezing on your ample beard there, dwarf, or something like that. You can foreshadow the environment before the thing happens. Dark clouds and a storm is about to hit. You're in the desert and you see the the dark churning clouds of a sandstorm coming close. Maybe there's been torrential rain and there's thunderstorms ahead. Um, the sun is high in the sky and you guys haven't had an ounce of water and you're getting dehydrated, right? You can use the environment to foreshadow what's going to happen later on. Now, when it comes to dungeon delving, whether it is going into a cavern and you hear the stones scraping against each other from a potential collapse, or small pebbles dribble down from the ceiling. Um, you guys know that I'm in the process of writing yet another uh, book in a cinematic environment series, and talking about, oh, you go into the dungeon and there's water dripping from the ceiling. You put your ear to the wall and you can hear the flow of water. You realize you're underneath, I don't know, Devil's Lake, that after you've gone into the dungeon or something like that, and you're like, ooh, that means if I poke the ceiling hard enough, will the lake fall in after us? Maybe, maybe not. And then you, as the dungeon master or the game master, can use that in your back pocket. Like, you know what? When things get a little boring, or I want to add a little bit excitement to it, maybe I will have that river start to flood the dungeon or something, right? Uh, um, and so, using the environment instead of like making it a man-made trap, some Rube Goldberg man-made trap or something, just make it the environment. So the place is slippery. There's old webs from a giant spider that used to be here. It's very sticky if you run through this hallway. Or heck, the natural landscape itself could fall away under your feet as a pit trap, and that pit trap doesn't even need to have a flat surface at the bottom. It could slide you into a gorge, or maybe there are sharp rocks at the bottom, or maybe it's not so much a trap that causes damage. Maybe it causes any number of a ton of conditions. Your ankle gets trapped in between two boulders and gets stuck. You think it's broken, or there's poisonous gas down in the underdark, and you're breathing it in. Make a save, or pass out, or become paralyzed, or incapacitated, or heck, um, the dead body of a gorgon is spewing out its decomposition after you poked it with your 10-foot pole. Make a save, or become petrified from breathing in its decomposing stomach gases or something, right? Like, you could reflavor, reshape any number of events in a classic dungeon crawl. Now, when it comes to man-made things, um, I like the idea of having broken man-made objects and hazards. Meaning, like, I love the classic rope bridge, right? It's a very tropish kind of thing, but a rope bridge is sweet, especially the more dilapidated it is. The the, the more the rope frays and the wooden planks are broken, the better, right? And of course, the rope bridge has to be over top of something no one wants to fall into: a raging river, a sharp rocks below, acid, lava, fire, whatever. A giant pit filled with the hungry undead reaching up for you, up towards you, right? Like, I like the idea of, well, you know what? At one time, this bridge was a major thoroughfare down into the Underdark. Uh, Now it's been forgotten, and the people who've lived here, including the Drow Empress and her house, her royal house, have long departed centuries ago. But sure, there's a bunch of bridges going over to her stalactite haven or something like that, but they're all there's been no upkeep, and they're dangerous to walk on, and they could collapse at any moment. Um, and then, of course, we do have not just like the man-made things that are untended, but there's also traps that were specifically designed by people that made perfect sense at one point, but make no sense today. We brought up war as being a great dungeon crawl background, right? Like, in war, in in descriptions of war, when it comes to creative process. I'm not talking about real life, although real life has a lot of elements from that. But in wartime television and movies, you do have, like, the sneaking around and the hiding and the crawling and the climbing past any number of hazards, whether it is there are soldiers on the watch, or there's a landmines, or barbed wire, or um, machines. When we go into science fiction, there are automated sentries and sensors, and the PCs can sneak around and sneak around those particular things. So, for example, in our real world, there so many landmines were dropped during wartime that they are still affecting people even till today, to the point where there's whole coalitions out there that are whose only purpose is to try to disarm all the landmines that were dropped from ages past. So, while a built-in Rube Goldberg machine that always resets itself might seem a little bit strange in a dungeon that might take you out of the immersion of it, um, you could have maybe 60 years ago, there was a perfectly good reason why people dug trenches and had some kind of magical glyphs, or semi-sentient automatons or constructs walking around the dungeon for a particular reason. But now that they're gone, those things are still active. So, having a reason why those things exist, the collapsing ceilings, the the Indiana Jones boulder rolling down after him. I mean, it kind of makes you think. Like, while we love Indiana Jones and can't get enough of that classic explorer Indiana Jones going into the unknown, there is this idea, like, who puts the boulder back? right? Yeah, you stole the idol. Okay, but who puts the boulder back? Right? Because if that was the case, why wouldn't they have just left the boulder in its down position and completely blocked any access to get to the ancient idol in the first place, right? Like, what? So yeah, there is a little bit of absurdity when it comes to some of those traps. Now, some people, will just go, yeah, guys, listen, I know it's absurd to have all these traps, but we're going to do it anyway. I'm looking at you, Tomb of Horrors, and all the permutations thereafter, right? But and of course, there's some ridiculous things in Tomb of Horror, like there's a room where your alignment changes for no particular good reason. There's another room where your gender changes for no particularly good reason, right? And of course, you have the rooms with the push the button, hit the lever, step on a pressure plate, and something strange or gonzo happens to you. Yeah, I can see why that would pull a lot of people, which is why a lot of people, gamers that want a more mature, story driven narrative, um, must make sense in my world reason why they stopped using dungeon crawls. So yeah, whether you fall on one side of whether the dungeon crawl should even still be around in gaming or not, I can see why you wouldn't like it, and then I also see the fun in why you would like it as well. Omen says maybe the boulder is actually sentient and goes back to its nook once it's done chasing the heroes. Yeah, I saw a monster like that in the Pathfinder 1E bestiary. Yeah, yeah, I know. Um, the the Gygaxian rust monster mimic gelatinous cube combo. What? Like, why is it specifically a 10-foot cube? Like, why wouldn't it just be some kind of gelatinous, I don't know, jelly, right? It's because it back in the day, the 10-foot wide hallway fit on graph paper. That's why it didn't. There was no. Sure, in hindsight, we can go back and start to rewrite monster ecologies and make it fit. But really, it was just because of graph paper and that pale blue um, graph that they used to print it in the actual modules, and then they went to just plain old black ink. But those of us old grognards going into the office supply stores to buy packs of graph paper, you remember. I know you remember. Um, Omen says there's also a comedy show in the Philippines a few decades back that a sentient boulder who pursued a specific character. That's that's ridiculous. I love that. I love that a lot. So, going back to what Dealer Umbra says about natural hazards, um, what the other thing I love about using the environment is to not. We don't need to have the environment be its own thing, right? Like we have an encounter. In encounter room 2, we have trolls. In encounter room 3, we have a pit trap. In encounter room 4, we have statues that breathe fire. You don't need to divide that up that way, right? I love the idea of not just having PCs and enemies and fighting on a flat ground. I love to have PCs fighting enemies in a dynamic location. And that, of course, we're talking about the dungeon crawl. I presume I'm including the dungeon crawl and the Underdark itself as like one and the same. So I apologize if you're thinking of something else like a wizard's tower or an ancient crypt or something like that. But the reason why I'm combining them together is because you can take a very boring encounter, bandits on the road, goblinoids. I always bring up goblinoids because they're like, if you want to go at the most boring encounter ever, pick yourself a bunch of random goblinoids and go for it, right? But the environment itself might be very not only just dynamic but memorable, right? So imagine fighting those bugbears or something. Imagine fighting those bugbears. Sorry, I'm laughing at the image that just popped up in my view in the Discord. So imagine you're fighting those goblinoids and you're doing it where the ceiling is about to collapse and stalactites are falling from the ceiling, but you have to maneuver in and around the stalagmites that are at the bottom of the cavern, right? Maybe maybe the place is filling very slowly with frigid cold water, and it's reached your ankles and it's getting ever higher. And then what is that you feel around your ankle? Are those like some kind of weird albino blind eels or something? And then an NPC in a group goes, ow, and their ankle gets bitten. And you're like, what the hell is that? And then all of a sudden, the room, now the water's up to your knees. And you're like, what? Okay, guys, we're going to need to get the hell up out of here. And all of a sudden, now the water's up to your waist. And even bigger blind eels start swimming around you in the dark and whatnot. And somebody drops their torch, and somebody else gets pulled down under the water when a tentacle wraps around their ankle. And it's like you can use the environment in really dynamic kind of ways. And I'm going to do this very quickly. You guys know, just like we have combat, range combat, melee, unarmed, grappling, that kind of thing. In social encounters, we have intimidation and persuasion and seduction and whatnot. And when it comes to environment, you guys know I love to talk about all kinds of environment, whether it's hey, Em, what's going on there? Yeah, peace to my brother from another mother. What's up there, Em? Yeah, dude, and thank you for waking up early in the morning, catching this. Yeah, we're just talking about whether the classic Dungeons and Dragons dungeon crawl should still be around in role-playing games, right? Classic role-playing games. And so you can have an environment where it's very static. A very static environment would be, oh, I don't know, darkness or fog. I guess you could do different versions of fog, mist, smoke, maybe even like some kind of like gas that might be debilitating or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a visual hazard. It could be sound, like a waterfall, and it's very loud. And of course, their water is falling. That's why they call it waterfall. Yeah, what is it? Cold Blade, magic darkness. You could have magic darkness. Why not? I I tend to default to something far more natural. With using magic as a last resort for a number of reasons. One is that when it comes to natural things, you can't dispel something natural. If there's a waterfall, it's just a friggin' waterfall, right? You don't have to explain what a waterfall is, or frigid snow, or lava, or I don't know, treacherous climbing climbing a cliff, and it's very treacherous and the rocks are going to fall on you. Like, you don't need to describe that in any kind of magical method. And because it's natural, you're not limited to, oh, it's only 20 feet wide or something like that, right? Like, you don't have to worry about that. You can if there's a blizzard can cover miles of distance, right? Whereas maybe a PC might balk at the idea that, I can't believe there's 30 miles of darkness, right? But we get caught up with the darkness because people will go, well, I've got dark vision. Okay, I hear you. You got dark vision out to 60 feet. What the hell's beyond that? Maybe you can hear something, smell something, right? But what's beyond that? And of course, darkness isn't the only visual hazard. Like I mentioned, fog, mist, smoke, all those things are visual hazards. But when it comes to the ground, why is the ground always flat? Norrev, what's going on there? So this seems interesting, but what are we doing exactly? Just check out the meta information below. This channel is an hour daily, every day, each day, and we talk about a particular subject. Today we're talking about the third pillar of exploration. Yes, and of course, this show, as listed below, is being simulcast on Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server, so you can participate in all of those as well. Now, along with using the environment to have some other static events, we can use heights. Instead of just being horizontal, we can go vertical. Are the PCs trying to jump from one pillar to another? Are they on top of a plateau? Are the enemies above them on top of a ledge or something? Going into our the guys in the Discord server are talking about the Filipino show about the sentient boulder. I think that image too is just hilarious. I love that image. But we not only do we just have our horizontal but vertical heights, but how do we navigate them? Are there creatures that can climb above and around the PCs, but the PCs can't do it? Or did one of the player characters find a particular location? How narrow and wide is the location that they're in, right? Um, yeah, I'm going to call you Rorik 2 says, I saw Is the Dungeon Crawl Dead and was excited. Yeah, yeah. Um, uh, Listen, we talked on this channel, while I am the talking head, we take a subject and we talk about it all week long, and then we subdivide it throughout the week. So we've got Monster Monday, Discord Tuesday, where we talk about mechanical events and effects. World Building Wednesday, where we build a world around whatever subject we're talking about, and today is Third Pillar Thursday, which is kind of like my specialty as the self-appointed third pillarist of the tabletop RPG community. I love talking about the environment, because I feel like the environment is the atrophied muscle of tabletop gaming. It is the thing that we tend to place the background, right? Meaning, like, again, let's talk about that boring encounter with the goblinoids, okay? Maybe that boring encounter is happening in a dungeon that's flooding. You're in a room and the water level's starting to come up. Or maybe, just maybe, something happens where the wall busts forth and that aquifer breaks forth, and the blood river that was above you when you went down into the dungeon starts flooding the place. And what could happen there? Is it just drowning? Maybe there's drowning, there's debris, there's mud. You could get anyone climbing for some safe distance could get flushed off of a cliff, holding on for dear life with their fingertips. And the flooding isn't just reserved for the player characters. Maybe the enemies get flooded away, right? And I think, dude, I don't know if you're a dude, but anyway, Rykor 2, it is something, says it's something I need to use more for sure. I think we all do, which is why I love bringing up the subject, because it's very easy for us to default to our player characters fighting behind a green screen, right? Rickard's like goblin surfing. Oh yeah. By force or choice, right? The first PC to surf a goblin, the other goblins are like, sweet, jump on my back. Right? But yeah, I mean, so what do you do if your dwarf is holding on for dear life to a ledge, and the goblinoids are throwing javelins at you? Do you take your opportunity to give a help action to your dwarf who's about to get washed away? I don't know, washed 40 feet per round down the dungeon corridor to slam into the stone and brick and stuff, and then get trapped. Someone's arm gets trapped between bricks or rocks or something, and the water levels rising above, and it's getting higher and higher, and then they can't breathe and they're underwater. What do? You're like, they'll make their save, I'm going to get out of here, right? Like, or do you give them help? And so the environment gives us an opportunity to create situations that are far beyond I kill it and it kills me, right? Now, Rykor 2 says, any tips for remembering the environment you are in? I used a blizzard in an urban setting, but it got forgotten unless it was important more often than not. I agree with you that, like I said, I think it's an atrophied muscle. I think it's one we have, but most role-playing games don't even address it very much beyond giving it a little bit of lip service. So we do tend to forget it. And when I say we, I'm talking about myself. And I write supplements about this crap, right? So yeah, it is a thing. And I think it depends on how much impact you want it to have on the story in the first place, right? It's the old adage of don't ask for a die roll unless it's important, unless success and or failure is important to that die roll, right? Otherwise, why bother asking the PC to make why ask the PC to make a roll to see if they see the orphan kid picking a pocket? If you wanted them to see it in the first place, don't make them make the die roll, right? Same thing with the environment. Like, It could just be a background descriptor, like you said. It's an urban environment. There's a blizzard. It's cold. People are trapped inside. Getting out of when they step in through a door, they're always like stomping their feet and brushing the snow off of their shoulders. But if there's a car chase or a chase across an urban landscape, and you want the cold air, the frostbite, the snow, the limiting of vision to be a thing, sure. I think it would be very important. Now, Dealer Umbra says I would say it makes matter. It say make it matter as much as you can. A blizzard is absolute hell to walk through. Yeah, those of us that live in a snow belt, yeah, it's pretty brutal, right? Rick says it's hard because you are not only imposing a challenge for the players, it restricts narrative progress as well. Exactly. So, um, if you are inclined to want to use a trap of some sort or some kind of hazard, it I feel like you should only use it if you feel that it will make the encounter a little bit more dynamic, right? It's not something it's not a yes or no. It's only use it or never use it, right? It is, would this be more interesting if this thing happened? Okay. The flooding cavern idea, right? Is it a slow flood? Like, oh, there's dripping water. We better better do a dungeon run, or is it very fast and it's sweeping people off their feet and slamming them into rocks and drowning them and things like that, right? Do you just want the encounter to be dynamic, or will this reveal more information to push the adventure forward, right? You don't want a locked door. You don't want it to cut off, like, oh, I'm going to flood the dungeon, and the PCs are like, well, I guess there's no way for us to get any further. I guess we're leaving, right? You don't want that to happen either, right? Now, Dealer Umbra says, I like to think of it as only roll if success and failure are both interesting and possible. Right. If people have enough time, energy, and resources to do a thing, don't bother rolling. Because the very thing that you wanted them to succeed on and it fails, you might be face palming like, don't. Oh man, I wanted them to see the orphan kids pickpocket the noble, right? You're like, well, okay, let them just see it. Rickard goes on to say, to make it work, you have to almost design the session around it so you don't end up having the blizzard grind the progress of the session to a halt. Exactly. And the thing may be like, after the encounter, maybe something else is revealed, right? Go out into the desolate desert, and the PCs go inside of the ancient crypt that's been revealed after a major sandstorm. Right? Sandstorm comes through. PCs are lost in the desert. Sandstorm ends after having a conflict with I don't know, desert cobras or something like that, or giant spiders or scorpions out in the desert. Encounter ends. Now the crypt is revealed, right? Like, so you could do something where, sure, the hazard is there and prevents their forward progress, but I would say that, I don't know, a lot of traps do the exact same thing, right? Fail to pass by that pit trap, and it slows your progress. So for me, it's more like a movie set, because I'm a very visual person, and so I think of it as it's okay to punch the person in the throat, but it's much cooler punching somebody in the throat on the wing of an airplane, or the skin of a ornithopter or something, or punching them in the throat on the deck of a storm-tossed ship or something, or punching somebody in the throat during what is it, the movie Mad Max Fury Road, and they're driving, they're having a car chase, and they're jumping from car to car with burning spears and things like that. And oh, by the way, here's a sandstorm that makes everything even more complicated, right? So, and then of course after the sandstorm, what happens? Well, it changed the landscape so that now the PCs involved in it, Mad Max and Furiosa, are now engaged in yet a different part of the dungeon, right? I'm I'm being rather facetious on that. Yeah, thanks. M says you're my hero and a great visionary. I learned a lot from you, dude. I That was never one way or the other, but I like You know me, I like exercising that mental muscle, and the channel's just a way for me to do that first thing in the morning. Um, Dealer Umbra says sandstorms come through, awakens the giant worm that lives beneath the dunes. Exactly, right. It's just one step in the next step in the next step. So I would never suggest making something super dynamic in the environment to only then completely stop the PCs from moving forward. I would say, hey, put it in the environment, have them fight. Like, what better way to fight Yetis in the snow than in a blizzard where their vision is reduced and they can barely hear each other except beyond a scream in each other's ear. And oh, by the way, the Yeti's yanking yet another PC out into the away from the party, into the deep snow, and you hear their muffled screams, right? It's I bring up this again. Sharks are dangerous, not just because they're sharks, but because you're in the ocean when you get bit. Alligators are dangerous not just because they're alligators, but because they grab you by the leg and might barrel roll you into dark, murky waters in a swamp, right? So I feel like the environment is underutilized. And during our Discord Tuesdays, we talk a lot about the mechanics of using that. Maybe one week I will talk about more of the mechanics, like far beyond difficult terrain or advantage disadvantage. That we can use a lot more um, environmental things, whether they're static events, escalating events, timed events, randomized events, stimulated events, like if then events, like if you do this thing, then this other thing will happen. And of course, combining all those events together, stacking them one on top of the other. Um, Ricker said, that said, you could always fast forward. So in the example of the sandstorm and the giant worm, you get the combat with the worm and the sandstorm. As soon as the combat is over, you could just assume the players find cover and fast forward until the sandstorm is over. Exactly, right? That's my other, not issue, but my other um, force that I'm trying to get across is that when using the environment, it doesn't mean everything else in the game stops, right? So we as players and game masters, we fast forward time all the time, right? Hey, last adventure you were in town. This time you've been at sea for 3 weeks, and the crew is getting antsy, and the captain is trying to keep morale at its highest. And then on the horizon, you see the uncharted island you've been going after, right? What did we do? We just fast forwarded. Same thing with the sandstorm and the worm. All right, PCs, you fought the worm, and the sandstorm came through, and you survived that. And now the giant worm is there. You fought the giant worm, and what do we do? All right, it's been 3 hours, and you've huddled in a cave to escape the blazing hot sun of the desert. But on the horizon, all of you tired and exhausted from your last battle, you see poking out of the desert a black monolith or something. What do? We just fast forwarded past it. You've assumed the short rest or long rest scenario. You've assumed the the dead worm that's below them on the sand, sliced open by the barbarian or something like that. Its body being, I don't know, decomposed already by fist-sized maggots or something. Like, you could really just fast forward through moving from one event to the next one. The flooding dungeon, and then all of a sudden, after the water passes by, you realize that in the flooded corridors now there's an exposed door, or boulders got moved out the way, and all of a sudden it opens up into even darker regions, or um, the flooding waters put out the wall of fire that was preventing you from progressing further into the dungeon. And now that the flaming wall of fire has been doused or something, or the ancient forge or foundry's great fiery engine has been doused, but you see there's a small ember in the bottom of it, and soon it will ignite yet once again. You guys might need to move on ahead past all the grinding gears of the ancient dwarven hold or something to get further into the dungeon. This is just me talking out of my ass, right? Like, it's just, yeah, we can move on forward. And one of the great things about the environment too, what I love is just it should be used and abused. So when a player character, we often describe success as the person who does the most damage is the most successful, right? And so therefore we feel, well, my character doesn't do a lot of damage, I'm less effective, because that's how we measure success and failure in a lot of our tabletop role-playing games, especially Dungeons and Dragons. But if we instead use the word effectiveness, effectiveness means that someone can be far more effective without having to do more damage, rolling more dice. An example would be, sure, maybe someone's barbarian can one strike, one kill uh, ogres or trolls or minotaurs, right? And your bard in the group is like, I can't do that. It would take me 5 or 6 rounds to take out a troll on my own. But if that bard is able to, I don't know, you use an old staff and push the rocks on top of the 6 ogres that are trying to reinforce their dying comrades that are attacking the barbarian, who's more effective in that? Barbarian kills one, bard just traps 6 of them in a cave in. Right? Maybe this also allows the spotlight to move around. Okay, so maybe the pyromancer in the group, the wizard pyromancer is like, I'm going to fireball everything, and the other player characters got their hands folded, like, I don't get to hit anything, I don't get to stab and punch and kick anything. But later on, if the cave is starting to be to fill with a flammable gas, and yes, I know the pyromancer would still use the fireball, but still, if that player has any common sense, would be like, "Ooh, I can't use my fireball right now. Maybe you guys have to take the spotlight, right?" It's just passing it around. Thank you, Dead Man. Dead Man's always on point with this. Yeah, we've got about 800 plus back episodes of content. Again, just to remind you guys, first of all, I'd like to thank um, all of you guys over there on Twitch who popped in. Yeah, the show goes live Monday through Friday. We take a subject, we start on Monday, and we talk about the subject all week long. So tomorrow is Future Friday, where we talk about science fiction, specifically like eclipse phase, altered carbon, transhuman space, like that kind of technological science fiction. But yeah, Monster Monday, Discord Tuesday, World Building Wednesday. Today, Third Pillar Thursday, where we talk about exploration and such, and then of course Future Friday. Rickard says dungeon crawl combat with environment, pillars holding up the grand hall you're fighting in, and the collateral damage from the spells and such start to make the pillars wobbly. Should 2 to 3 of them fall, the roof will cave in on the hall. I love that. I love that. So what Rickard was just talking about, you've got the great pillars. We've seen that before, right? 2 or 3 of them fall, all of a sudden, ceiling starts to crumble. Maybe you foreshadow it a little bit. Ogre gets punched gets throat punched by the monk. Ogre's head falls back and cracks into a pillar. Pillar cracks. All of a sudden, rocks start falling from the ceiling, right? Little foreshadow. Let somebody know what might happen. Now, guess what? Does the enemy start to knock the pillars down? Do one of the PCs start to knock the pillars down? Do the PCs go, hell no, we better not let this happen? Or does a PC go, you know what? Instead of me trying to fight off these darn ogres that seem to be spawning out of that damn corridor 2 and 4 at a time, maybe I'm just going to knock the pillars over, right? What happens then? You know? Or Rorik says, says, I used a fireball in the sewer once. I learned something that day. Yeah. Yeah, right? Like, yeah, and also, sometimes we get a little bit, let's be honest, sometimes we have encounters and we're stuck. We're like, oh my God, I can't, this is so friggin' boring. I can't get past it, right? Yeah, methane fire, hell yeah. Lighten up those farts, right? And so sometimes we get a little bit boring. It gets a little bit boring. And yes, I can hear some people saying, oh my God, you're going to nerf my character. And I'm thinking, well, wrong, correct, but wrong terminology. Some people, like, for example, the barbarian on the rope bridge, might not have any ranged attacks to fight goblins flying on the pterodactyls, right, while they're throwing javelins at the party, right? Okay, so maybe in this encounter, you're not very effective. The next time you fight those same goblinoids down in the cave and you're in tight space and the barbarian's cracking his knuckles like hells yeah, right? Maybe then you become more effective. And so by changing the landscape literally and figuratively around the player characters, some might rise to the occasion and others fall. Um, sure, the pyromancer is great in the open urban area, setting fire to their enemies, but maybe you might not want to do that on a storm-tossed sailing ship. Maybe you might want to let this devolve to the monk and the rogue, kicking ass on the ship and save your fire spells because everyone's going to like drown and stuff. Right? Norv says, great stuff with a lot of cool ideas to get imagination going on. Thanks for doing this. No, dude. First of all, it's not me, it's everybody else. And second of all, that's all the show is. Monday through Friday, dude, it's nothing but like kicking loose the cobwebs sometimes, or maybe we're like writing something or trying to come up with a great idea for like a player character or an adventure. And we're like, man, I got to have a new infusion of like mental fuel. And so that's all the show is. It's just basically just, I look at it like we're about to play the game, or we just played a cool session and we're sitting around the table, just having an open discussion and stuff. The show's unscripted. As Tesla Ranger and Deadman, who have been absolutely positively loyal for years of the show, they will attest that I do zero research and I know nothing. So they are the ones who are super on point about making sure that I get things out there with some correct information. And also, if you join the Discord server, unlike Twitch and YouTube chats, you're unable to put like links or pictures or things like that. The Discord server allows you to put in those kind of links, except for the moderators. So if there's something in particular you wanted to share or whatever, those are a great place to do. Also, before the show goes live and a little bit after the show, I remain in the Discord server, just talking about general BS. Sometimes it's gaming, sometimes it's not, so you can join there as well. So yeah, thank you very much there, Norv. Ricker said, I would suggest to always try to design a combat just as any scenes around the characters. Yeah, exactly. If you do, like, you don't just have to say encounter with trolls. You could design the combat with the trolls, that they're in that chamber with the pillars that might crumble, right? And maybe, just maybe, one of the trolls decides to like get angry and back fist one of the pillars and it starts to crumble, and the troll might be like, ooh, maybe that's a good idea, or the troll grabs, maybe write a little note. If the troll grapples one of the PCs, they're going to pick him up by the throat and slam him into one of the pillars, and the pillar was going to start to crumble or something. Like you could make little notes like that to see if it might happen. And if it does happen, great, and then the player characters might be thinking, cool, hey, everybody hit the pillars, Lister? Lister says, yeah, overlooking the environment as a means to make your players panic is a wasted opportunity for laughs. Also, like the opposite, placing objects that a creative player can use to come up with a cool scene to avoid combat and die rolls, or pull something fancy, and join a free-flowing chat. Thanks. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, like you said, maybe, okay, collapsing pillar idea. Could one of the PCs say, hey, they raise their hand like, could I take cover behind one of the pillars? And you go, I hadn't thought about that. Hell yeah. Okay, it's cover. It's on the ground. Or someone's like, man, my character's got 22 strength. Could I pick up a big chunk and use it as like an improvised weapon? And you go, improvised weapons. I think it's D4. Wait a minute. No. I can make up what it. Yeah, you know what? If you use the weapon and you score a hit, you'll get, I don't know, D10 damage, but the rock will like crumble in your hands or something. And the barbarian's like, cool, I'm going to use that instead. Boom, pick up or I'm going to use the boulder and throw it on top of the ogre's ankle or something so he can't move or whatever, right? Like you could come up with so many different ideas just in that encounter so that you could, it requires us as dungeon masters and game masters to be fluid and think on the fly. But if we allow ourselves little breathing rooms, maybe you might have to take a moment and go, I hadn't thought about that, guys. What do you guys think? And everyone's like, well, no, it makes a lot of sense to do this other thing. Or how do I time the enemy to go across the rope bridge and then I can cut the ropes on the rope bridge? I don't know. Let's see. All right, how about we roll initiative? And if your initiative is higher than theirs, you get to do the thing first before they cross the bridge. Great. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my axe and cut the rope bridge instead of attacking them one by one. And of course, you as the game master thinking in your head, like, damn it, I hadn't thought about that. But whatever. It's not like I'm going to run out of monsters, right? you know? Yeah. Rorik says, sure, why not? It's one of my favorite things to say as GM. Yeah. All right. Rickard says, why do you want to highlight? Oh, who do you want to highlight in this combat? What aspect of a character do you want to highlight? What do you want the non-highlighted to do? Remember, the game should still be fun for them as well. Exactly. And what I find fun is, and this is just a personal thing, it's not for everyone. I'm talking about the barbarian and the wizard and the monk and whatnot. It might be really cool to see the wizard step forward as the great one when the barbarian and monk have to step back, right? Whereas the next scene, that might flip on its head. So even characters who are not highlighted in the adventure or in that particular scene might still be very effective doing something else, right? And if you give them enough options, do I help my drowning player or do I attack the enemy and watch my drowning fellow get swept away in the flooding chamber, right? Which one do I want to choose? Putting that in the hands of the player characters and you just setting up the problems without the actual solutions is a great thing. If the wizard goes, I'm going to cast a floating disc spell to lift up the PC, and you didn't think about it, you go, slow clap, great. That's a great idea, right? Go for it. I'm going to use my rope trick spell so that the rope goes down into the water and he can grab onto the rope when he gets washed downstream and can grab onto the rope and climb up, use it. And you go, I hadn't thought about using a spell like that. All right, makes a lot of sense, right? We can pull out of our ass a lot of really creative things. And one of the ways to get your players to use the environment is get the NPCs to do it first. Have your NPC monsters do it either on purpose or by accident, right? Have the giant worm slither into the chamber and start knocking against the pillars, and the place starts crumbling, right? The giant subterranean worm doesn't care, but the PCs are like, oh shoot, oh, it's going to collapse the ceiling on us too? We better get out of here. And one PC's like, I can take them out, right? By using the environment, the win condition isn't we survive, we kill the thing, or it kills us. It could be getting to the other side of the room, climbing to the highest location, doing nothing so much as to fight past the enemies to close shut whatever it is that is they're spawning from or something. Like, hey, it's not about killing the dragon or dragon-like beast that's chained to the wall. It's getting past the thing that's chained to the wall, not killing it, right? And sure, we could spend 8 rounds trying to kill it, but if we only have 3 rounds to survive in this room before the poison gas knocks us all out and the thing chained to the wall gets to eat us for breakfast, maybe we shouldn't be doing these things. Rickard says, to take the example of the barbarian not being able to attack the flying goblins, you don't need to do a lot to make the bow ranger and mage to make the bow ranger and mage feel like they are having fun in that encounter. Exactly. And sure, the barbarian in that group with maybe just a hand, like a big old battle axe, can't fight the flying things unless, I suppose you could open it up a little bit. Hey, can I jump off the rope bridge onto the back of one of those flying pterodactyls and kick the goblin, off of it? And you go, hadn't thought about that. let's come up with a way for you to do this kind of thing, right? Maybe so. Maybe the barbarian character is like, you know what? If I was a player character, I'd go, dude, it's not my turn. It's not my. This isn't the scene where I'm supposed to be front and center. Period. I'm going to help out my allies any way I can. Right? Maybe one of the flying goblins on a pterodactyl gets a little close. Hey, I'm going to stand in front of the wizard and attack it when he gets close. Great. Okay. You get to do that thing. Rick goes on to say, but you might have some heavy scaffolding up against the cliff, right? To decide that anyone with enough strength can collapse so the crumbling debris could take out some of the flying goblins. Exactly. Maybe there's something else, maybe you could, after everyone gets across that rope bridge, maybe the barbarian with his axe is like, great, now it's my turn, and I'm going to cut the bridge down and make it fall on top of them, right? Who knows? Ricker goes on to say, so you as a DM, in my opinion, needs to think about how you can include all the players in the encounter. Absolutely. Even, hell, every encounter doesn't need to be a combat encounter, right? Right, Rickard? Like, maybe they talk their way out of it. Maybe they intimidate their way out of it, or sneak. Maybe it's better for them to sneak around the environment to get past the dangerous thing that's there, right? Who knows? So anyway, guys, I've got to head out. It is very early my time. I do this before going off to work. So I thank you for joining me. All of you in the Twitch channel, thank you so much for stopping by. Excellent interaction as always. I love you guys having great ideas and such. Norev, just like everybody else over there on Twitch and YouTube and hanging out in the Discord, great to have you. Just participate. I would appreciate it. You have a better interaction if you don't spam the chats. You could be thoughtful, extend out what you need to say. I will read the comments as much as possible, just so that I can. You might not be able to describe what you're trying to say. So I'm very much one who tries to read between the lines. So don't worry about that part of it as well. Anyway, guys, everybody have a great one. Thank you very much for joining me on this on this channel. Everybody have a great one. Rorik, Lythander, Norev, man, everybody have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. Bye. This is awkward because I'm supposed to be saying thank you for watching.